Okay. Hello, thank you everyone for joining us today for our online postgraduate webinar covering a few programs today. My name is Noor and I'm a Senior Marketing Officer here at the School of Advanced Study. Today we're joined by three program directors who will speak about each of their PhD research programs, and they'll give you tips for your study and your applications. First we have Dr. Andrew Nash, who is the Deputy Director for the Institute of English Studies. We then have Professor Charles Burdett, who is the Director for the Institute of Languages, Cultures and Societies. And finally, we have Dr. Jamille Pinheiro, who is the Director of the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. I hope this webinar will be useful for you today and help answer any questions that you have about conducting your PhD research with us, and it will help you submit your application. So before we begin, just a reminder that the application deadline for each of these PhDs is the 31st of July 2025 to start with the September intake for later this year. So we will begin with Andrew, who will introduce the School of Advanced Study to us and then speak about the PhD in English Studies. Following the presentation, we'll have a live Q&A session, so keep an eye on the chat box. One of my colleagues will be posting there. The chat box is on the right side of your screen. If it's not visible, you'll find a button that you can click and it will open there. And we'll answer your questions live on camera, and some questions might be answered in the chat box or links will be posted there. So let's begin. Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Noor. So welcome everybody to the University of London and this panoramic view of the city. I'm going to begin, as Noor said, by talking a little bit about the School of Advanced Study, where it sits within the university and what its makeup is. So the school is one of the federal members of the University of London, and it exists to act as a national centre for humanities, to promote research, promotion and facilitation, and to undertake research training and teaching in the humanities subjects. And it consists of 8 institutes, and they're listed here, in addition to which there is also a Digital Humanities Research Institute, which coordinates digital humanities projects across the school and supports the individual work of institutes, as well as individual students working in institutes on digital projects. And we also have a number of centres of excellence, one of which you'll be hearing about today, the Centre for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. Now, students are submitted to the School of Advanced Study and they have a home in one of these institutes, but we very much encourage students to explore the School of Advanced Study as a whole and to collaborate with to meet and collaborate with other students in other institutes. And one of the most attractive things of SAS is the way that the institutes work together around events, around the training opportunities that we provide for postgraduate research students, and also in a number of student-led activities. So today we'll be talking about 2 of these institutes, the Institute of English Studies and the Institute of Languages, Cultures and Societies. As I said, the School of Advanced Study provides a national centre for research and teaching in the humanities. And we run a range of summer schools, short courses and research training activities, in addition to master's programmes and PhD programmes across the school. And students have access to all of these activities. So if you're a postgraduate research student in SAS, you're able to participate in the short courses and the summer schools that are on offer across the institutes, and also in the research training activities. And these include training activities that are mounted by the School of Advanced Study and also our partners across the University of London, and specific bespoke training that takes place in individual institutes. PhD students at SAS study either full-time or part-time, and full-time students typically undertake their PhD project over 3 to 4 years, and part-time students undertake a minimum of 5 years and a maximum of 7 years. And in practice, most students, if they're studying full-time, will take 3 years on a full fees arrangement, with the fourth year on a writing up fee arrangement with a reduced fee. All research students register in the first instance for the MPhil degree, and then they upgrade subject to passing the upgrade process, usually in their second year. And the upgrade process consists of a panel that is put together, and a student submit a piece of work of 10 to 15,000 words, draft material that they have produced during the first 12 to 18 months of their research. And the panel explore the work the student has produced, and subject to satisfactory progress, students are then upgraded to the PhD degree. SAS offers both local and distance learning modes of study. The local studies, the campus-based study, means that students are based in London. The distance learning options can vary from institute to institute, but the general rule is that students have to attend a number of activities on campus, usually twice in a calendar year. But the bulk of the learning is undertaken at distance, and students in those situations, distance learning students, will be able to take advantage of the outstanding electronic resources of Senate House Library, which I'll come to in a moment. All students are allocated 2 supervisors, a primary supervisor and a secondary supervisor. And how the supervisory arrangement works can vary in practice. In most instances, the 2 supervisors are effectively joint supervisors, so a student has access to more than one area of expertise among their supervisory team. And as I've mentioned, one of the most attractive things about SAS is the comprehensive research training program that we provide for all students. And this includes research training courses that are offered to students in other universities. So we invest quite a lot of time and effort into developing cutting-edge research training program to support all kinds of PhD research. So I'm now going to talk more specifically about postgraduate research at the Institute of English Studies. The Institute of English Studies is a small faculty of experts specializing in book and manuscript studies and in selected areas of English studies. The Institute exists to promote and support the teaching and research in English studies nationally, but we also act as a center of excellence for book history, manuscript studies, and textual editing. And this is why in these selected areas that I've produced here, a list, I've identified first at the head, book and publishing history, book and manuscript collecting, digital humanities, and digital textual editing. Because most of the staff that work in the Institute and most of the potential supervisors open to you specialize in these areas. But we also offer supervisory expertise in a number of other areas, particularly medieval studies, early modern literature and history, and aspects of 19th century literature, 20th century literature, and American literature. More recently, we've added new areas of supervisory expertise in radical print culture and creative and practice-based research, which I'll come to in a minute. One of the main criteria we consider when assessing applications is the fit between the student's research proposal and the specialist expertise of our team of supervisors. We're not able to provide expert supervision in all areas of English studies, and if we think your project would be better undertaken at another institution, then we'll offer you support in helping you to identify the best place to go. It's crucial when you're undertaking advanced level research, which is what underpins a PhD, that you have the best possible supervisory expertise. So my best advice after participating in this webinar is to look very closely at the individual staff profiles, which are listed on the web pages, to identify whether or not there is a potential supervisor with a particular research interest in the area that you want to explore. Have a look at their recent publications, have a look at the research projects they're involved in, have a look at the work they've done in the past and the work they're undertaking at the present, and think about whether or not their expertise would be the most appropriate guide for you to undertake your own research. In addition to the traditional PhD, students at SAS can also pursue a PhD by practice, and that's where the creative and practice-based research component comes in. The PhD by practice works a little bit differently from the traditional PhD. Students produce a creative output of some kind as the main component of their thesis, with an accompanying critical commentary of around 30,000 words. And this opens up scope for practice-based work in a number of areas related to English studies, such as curation, book design, and creative writing. And we're very keen to explore potential projects with students interested in working on practice-based projects. I put up here a list of some of the recent and PhD topics that we have supervised in the Institute, and you'll see that the range is quite extensive, from work on Shakespeare's First Folio and heraldry in illuminated manuscripts from the 13th to the late 14th century, right up to specialist work on the 19th and 20th century, such as a project on the history of the Society of Authors and a publishing history of post-war British queer fiction. This is just a selection, but I hope you can see that the specialist topics respond very closely to the research interest of individual members of staff and to those core areas of interest that I put up on the previous slide. So, for example, the PhD on F. Scott Fitzgerald was supervised by a professor with a particular international acclaim as a scholar of F. Scott Fitzgerald. Students at the School of Advanced Study, but especially at the Institute of English Studies, I think, benefit from membership of Senate House Library, which, as well as being one of the country's leading research libraries, boasts the largest open access collection of books and materials in manuscript studies and book history in the country. In addition to these open access materials, there are also major research collections and extensive archival and special collections, particularly in the areas of the areas that I've indicated are core to our expertise in English studies of book history and bibliography and the history of writing, publishing, and printing. We also have long-standing relationships with many of London's other outstanding libraries and collections, and can offer students easy access to a wealth of primary sources and curatorial knowledge. And several of our current students are jointly supervised by heritage organisations such as the National Archives, the British Museum, and the British Jesuit Archives. So these links that we have can be very useful as a guide to helping you unlock the riches that exist in London's libraries and archives and museums. We have a motto in the Institute of English Studies. It's speaking for and about books. And our research students come from a variety of backgrounds, and they're united by an interest in and an eagerness to explore books and literature. Some of our students pursue PhD study after completing a master's program, while others choose to study with us to advance an existing career or after they have finished a career. And that, I think, is quite unusual and distinctive about the School of Advanced Study. We often have students who are working in librarianship or in the archive sector or in the rare book trade, who are seeking an advanced academic qualification to support their career. Equally, we have had students who have finished a career in those areas, but want to explore things further. So we support students seeking to unlock or advance career options in a variety of sectors, including libraries, archives and museums, the culture and creative industries, as well as education and academia. We have especially close links with the antiquarian book trade in London, and we're able to introduce students to a unique fund of knowledge and expertise through work placements and more informal networking. And then finally, just to conclude, the Institute offers an exciting and unique intellectual environment in which to pursue doctoral research. Our regular programme of events and seminars covers subjects ranging from medieval manuscripts and the history of libraries to Shakespeare, modernism, and contemporary innovative poetry. Our international summer schools, the London Rare Book School and the London International Paleography School, provide opportunities to explore new subjects and acquire new skills, as well as to meet and work with students, teachers, librarians and curators from all over the world. So we hope that through undertaking a PhD research at the Institute, you'll be able to expand your horizons and to learn more about the book world. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pass back to Noor.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very helpful, both the introduction to SAS and talking about the IES PhD. I think especially seeing the list of projects that have recently been completed or are currently being undertaken, that's very interesting to read. I will now share the slides for Charles and Jamille, and they can start their presentation. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Studying for a PhD at the Institute of Languages, Cultures and Society. We can go to the next slide. Andrew's talked about the School of Advanced Study, and for us that is indeed one of the most engaging and important things about studying at the ILCS, as we say, is that you are constantly in contact with the academics, the institutes that constitute the School of Advanced Study. It's a very open and interdisciplinary environment located at the very heart of London. So if we go on, let's just say a little bit about the institute itself. The institute, or ILCS, supports research in the integrated study of languages, cultures and societies. It enables researchers to collaborate in a wide range of national and international networks to involve themselves in innovative research and to demonstrate the social, cultural and economic benefits of research in the integrated study of languages and cultures. I think the way in which the world is developing, even over the last few weeks, really does show just how urgent it is to be able to speak and interact with and be knowledgeable about the various societies and cultures that constitute our world. We have a number of research seminars, lectures, workshops, colloquia, and I think it would be worth just looking at our website, our events page, for seeing the international reach and the kinds of themes that we address in our work. We also have a publication series, a conference support series, and a fellowship program. We have fellows spending a few months with us or longer from every possible country. We play a leading role in debates that concern the shape of the disciplinary area and its engagement with issues of high topical concern. We also participate in the school, the SAS's development of researcher training at the highest level. If we move on. So, Jamille.
Thank you, Charles. I'm very pleased to introduce CLACS, the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, and to show you some reasons why to consider it as a place to pursue your PhD. We continue the legacy of the former Institute of Latin American Studies that was founded in 1965. So CLACS has a long-standing tradition of fostering cutting-edge research in Latin American and Caribbean studies. And as a student here, you will be part of a very vibrant intellectual community that, as Andrew and Charles said, engages with key debates across disciplines. And our program offers access to Senate House Library that Andrew has talked about. So it's a world-class library full of quite impressive research collections. We are also part of a global research network, so we will offer connections with scholars and institutions across Latin America, the Caribbean, other parts of Europe, the US. And one of our strengths is specialized training to enhance your research skills, from archival work, ethnographic field work, translation. So if you're looking for an environment where your research can have a real impact, we do encourage you to consider joining us. So next slide, please.
So the research and teaching strengths are: we support research in an integrated study of language, society, and culture. We have a wide range of national and international networks pursuing innovative research. We have cross-disciplinary seminars, workshops, colloquia. We play a leading role in debates that shape the subject area of languages and cultures. We engage with issues of high topical concern, and we are the leading provider of doctoral training for languages and cultures. If we move on. So some of the research and teaching strengths of the Institute. One of them, since we do look at a range of different expressions of culture, subjectivity, language, we tend not to focus uniquely on one particular area, but to support the transnational and transcultural study of language and culture. And we do have a number of contacts, of course, with areas or institutes that study other aspects of the globe. Our strengths primarily reside in the fields of French and Francophone, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Latin American and Caribbean studies. But we don't do so simply focusing upon these language areas. It's always done in transnational, transcultural, multilingual, and multicultural focus. Our staff expertise covers literary, historical, ethnographic, digital research. There's a strong emphasis in our institute on post-colonial and migration studies and environmental humanities. To move on.
Well, and at CLACS, interdisciplinary research is also at the core of what we do. We work across the humanities and social sciences. We engage with a wide range of topics, from the integrated study of languages, cultures, and societies to translation, indigenous cultures, anthropology, and environmental issues. And just to mention that, we also have at SAS an environmental humanities research hub, which I co-direct. So it is really one of our strengths. And as a PhD student working with us, just to highlight again how impressive Senate House Library is. It holds more than 90,000 volumes dedicated to Latin American and Caribbean studies. Many of our graduates go on to build successful careers beyond academia as well. Academia is a possibility, but you can also pursue a career in cultural institutions, in the GLAM sector, and in policymaking organizations. So if your research aligns with these fields, we invite you to consider applying. Charles?
Okay, moving on to the next slide. Yes, the quotation from me. The crucial time in the development of the subject area, the Institute, with a strong emphasis on the transnational and transcultural study of languages and cultures, together with its active promotion of cross-disciplinary research initiatives, represents an ideal environment in which to pursue postgraduate study. I said that, and I very genuinely and passionately believe that. So, next slide. Just quickly on the research strengths of members of staff, Andrew very eloquently said that you should be looking at the research profile, interests of members of staff, what they're interested in, what they're doing, what their current research is about. And you can find all this information on our website. There's my interests are in Italian colonial presence in Africa and its legacies, theories of intercultural contact, the Islamic world and contemporary Italian culture. Professor Gordeler by Sussex works on 20th and 21st century German culture and literature, strong emphasis on modernism and on migration. Joseph Ford works on Francophone literature with a particular focus on Algeria and on decolonial practice. Naomi Wells works on cultures of migration and mobility, on language issues, and on digital discourse. Katia Pizzi on history and culture of Trieste, on cultural memory, on modernism and the European avant-garde. Johann Siebers, who works for us, as well as the University of Middlesex, works on post-Kantian German philosophy, language and communication. Next slide.
So having the right supervisors makes all the difference. And here at CLACS, you will be supervised by leading scholars in Latin American and Caribbean studies who are deeply engaged in their fields. And so this is a close-knit intellectual community where you find a highly collegial environment. Ainhoa Montoya is an anthropologist. She's a reader in Latin American studies, and she's very engaged with environmental anthropology. She's also involved with our environmental humanities research hub. I work on environmental issues, indigenous cultures, translation studies as well. So if you're interested in one of those fields, please feel free to reach out to me. Sophie Stevens does work on translation studies, feminist translation studies, theater translation. She has a lot of experience in the Southern Cone, so Argentina, Uruguay. Naomi Wells is involved with digital humanities and cultures of migration, multilingualism. And we have two Professor Emerita who are available to co-supervise, Catherine Davis as well, and Linda Nilsson, who have been fundamental people to build the strengths and the legacy of our center. Next slide, please.
So, yes, just very quickly, this is about a PhD, but we also have very recently introduced with the teaching, will be starting at the end of this year or the beginning of the next academic session, an MA in Languages and Cultures Across Borders, with groundbreaking content, format, collaboration that stretches across the whole of the University of London, multiple languages, diverse modes of assessment and funding available. If we go to the next slide, which has modules on transdisciplinary methodologies, on contact zones, language, location and legacy, materiality and temporality, understanding environmental humanities, as well as the possibility of doing a module with one of the partner institutes of the University of London. I think that gives a real flavour of the kind of work that we are engaged in and the collaborations that we pursue. So if we move on. So the structure of the PhD, ILCS provides first-class PhD supervision with the academics that we have in the Institute. And as Andrew said earlier, we will certainly work with a range of specialists well beyond the University of London, but certainly within the University of London. We have a number of networks associated with our research centres. For example, the Centre for Contemporary Women's Writing, for Cultural Memory, and the Centre for German and Austrian Exile Studies, and of course, the Centre for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. So if we move on. So I won't repeat some of the things that Andrew has said. Just very briefly say that you can study full-time over 3 years, a maximum of 4, or part-time over 5, or a maximum of 6. You write a thesis of up to 100,000 words. There is no formal coursework, but you are very much encouraged to participate in our seminars, and especially in our leading National Centre for Research Training. Once you have submitted your thesis, there's an oral examination. Just to go on. But the most important thing is, of course, to select a PhD topic. And you shouldn't really do this on your own. You should be thinking about what really grabs you, what your interests are, what you've enjoyed at undergraduate or master's level, and then really think about contacting and speak to a potential supervisor who will, I can assure you, be delighted to speak to you. You should be thinking about what is topical, what do people need to know about? Is the study of an element of a period or thematic concern? How feasible is it? Why does this study need to be undertaken now? Why should people be interested in it? What is the global relevance of it? And what, above all, is the corpus of texts or visual material that you want to look at? To move on. Andrew has said also that we do offer a PhD by practice. That's an important development. And that slide gives information just to support what Andrew was saying about how PhD doesn't have to be 100,000 or up to 100,000 words. It can also be a body of creative work, whether that's creative writing, translation, exhibition, curation, and more. It can be done that way. To move on. So some of the examples of topics of languages and cultures: a female German exile in post-war London, issues of trauma, identity, and post-memory, enlightened patriotism in practice in left-wing journalism, historical philosophical study of German Jewish thought, representing the Arab diaspora in contemporary film and literature. That's especially in Britain, Italy, and France, and post-migration memory and Jewishness in German language third-generation literature. And then to look at some of CLACS PhDs. Next slide.
So, as I said, our faculty members engage with a wide range of topics, from anthropology to environmental issues, indigenous studies, and our PhD students are working and have worked on exciting research projects that contribute to global debates on politics, culture, the integrated study of languages and culture. So here are just a few examples. For instance, the role of community self-defense groups in state-society relations in Mexico, the origins of natural history and ethnology in colonial Peru, embroidery as a form of creative activism for peace in Mexico, the translation of indigenous voices into international environmental politics, particularly in the Amazon. So these projects really highlight the range of research that we support and give you an idea of what kind of research aligns with our expertise, what we are able to offer. So do consider the possibility of joining us.
Absolutely. So just a few more formal things. Applicants for PhD programs are usually required to hold a master's degree. We will consider applications from candidates who do not meet the formal academic requirements. We do interview all our candidates. English is the language of instruction, and you will be required to demonstrate an appropriate level of proficiency. That's not just for us, that's across the whole of the University of London. You need to submit a formal proposal in your application, and this is something that you discuss at length, as we were saying, with your supervisor. And yes, details on how to supply are there. Just moving on. Yes, also information about fees and bursaries are provided in these, are provided here. You can find them both on the School of Advanced Study website and indeed on the website of ILCS. The principal source of funding being the London Arts and Humanities Partnership. There is, just to move on, there are funding opportunities for our MA program. If you go to our site, the ILCS site, that's very clearly indicated with information about the MA. Just on the subject of bursaries for PhD study, there are 2 bursaries at the moment offered for entry in October 2025. Students wishing to focus their research on an area of German literature and culture. Both the Bithel and Germanic Friends bursaries are available to students who have been accepted for the MPhil PhD degree in German literature and culture at ILCS, and provide a waiver of tuition fees at the home rate. In addition, the Bithel studentship offers a maintenance grant equivalent to that paid by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. The bursaries are available for 3 years full-time study or 5 years part-time study. The closing date for the bursary applications is the 5th of April 2025. Do just look at the SAS, our postgraduate funding site, or if you want to get in touch directly with Professor Gordula Weiss, Sussex, please do. I mention these because they are happening this year. It's a great thing, and we do want people, of course, to be aware of that. And moving on. So I think we've talked enough about contacting people and talking to your potential supervisors. That is essential. And then the next slide. Oh yes, and that indeed is the end of our presentation. And we wanted to end by saying just how this isn't a process that you just work on your own. The thing to do is to work about what really drives you and to get in touch with us and individual members of staff.
Thank you very much, Charles and Jamille. Thank you for your presentation. It is now time for the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. There are a couple in there already, so I'll start by asking these. Luan, hi there. Thank you for today's presentation. I'm very interested in applying for the upcoming application period. I've reached out to a few advisors with my research idea, but I haven't heard back. I would love some guidance on how to connect with an advisor. I think if Luan could provide some more details which program that they've applied to, so we can ask directly to either Andrew or Charles and Jamille about getting contact back. Another question that's come in is, how do you prepare for PhD study? Is there any, it is different from master's level, but how does it compare in terms of the independence that people have to use to study at PhD level?
Do you want to go first, Andrew, since we've just been speaking?
If you'd like me to, I think the word independence is obviously the most important thing. I think the advice I would give is that you don't really sort of hit upon an idea for a PhD research project overnight. It's something that emerges from a long process of reading and understanding of a subject area. And as Charles said, the having early conversations with potential supervisors, or indeed anybody who is a potential advisor on the topic, is really crucial, because a research proposal will go through a number of iterations before you and your potential supervisor is confident that the topic can be pursued to the level that is required for a PhD. Although the PhD is an independent piece of work undertaken by you as an individual, certainly, I mean, within the humanities, it's a different model from the sciences. It is something that works through constant interaction with your supervisor and constant interaction with your peers. So you're not alone, even though the PhD can seem an isolating experience. I think that's probably the sort of two things that immediately spring to mind, but maybe Charles or Jamille have got a few things to add.
Yeah, Jamille, do you want to say a couple of words about, doing a PhD and how you get there? It is, as Andrew said, something that, it takes time and it takes a lot of conversations till you're really happy with something.
Yeah, I entirely concur, Andrew. I think this is a long process. It takes a lot of reading, spending time with different interlocutors, being exposed to different strands of research, considering different disciplines, and really engaging with a variety of perspectives and in different fields, and giving it time. So if you think about independence builds on this long process. That's how it is crafted, I think, over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is that you need to be obviously passionate about what you want to study. It takes time to hone that down into a subject that is feasible. You do that in conversation with people. And of course, it changes and develops throughout the PhD writing process. It is not that one has an idea and one simply accomplishes it. One begins on a journey, and that process is an epistemological, cultural, personal journey that you accomplish.
Yes, and curiosity is a key driver too, I believe.
Yeah, I think if I just quickly add to that, I think that's a really good point that you've made, Charles. I think that in the humanities, we encourage students to think in terms of research questions rather than hypotheses that are to be tested. So we want students to be curious, to have questions that they're seeking to answer, not ideas they've already formulated that they're trying to test.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, Charles.
Sorry, just on the very specific thing about, yes, contacting a supervisor. As director of the institute, I tend to get quite a lot of inquiries, which if they're directly in my field, I will respond to them. If not, I forward them to my colleagues, who then think about them. They don't just dash off an email. Or indeed, if it does come to it just lies outside of our area of expertise, we will always respond to that and say, well, it isn't quite what we do, but have you considered, say, SOAS or Westminster or Durham or further afield? We will always try to make sure that we can suggest ways of proceeding, but we always do make sure that we respond and are very happy to discuss things via email, obviously, to begin with, and subsequently, if there is a match between our expertise and that of a potential student, then things develop from there.
Okay, that's great. Luan, she did add that Luan did add that they were interested in the ILCS PhD and focusing on cultural studies. So I suppose if they can resend their email to you, Charles, and then you can...
Yes, absolutely. And yes, we'll look at it. Indeed. And it really is about matching expertise, but we'll always respond and make suggestions.
Thank you. Lissandro has asked if the PhD by practice has a different timetable.
No, it doesn't. It fits into that model that we've been talking about of if it's undertaken full-time, it's a minimum of 3, a maximum of 4 years, and part-time a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 6 or 7 years. We are in the process of finalizing the various progression hurdles, but they follow the same pattern as the traditional PhD. So a student has to go through an initial progression hurdle at the end of their first year, where their progress is reviewed, and then the formal progression, which takes place at some point during the second year. And a substantial part, as I say, of a complete chapter or a draft chapter is submitted for the traditional PhD. And for the PhD by practice, then a clear outline of the creative element. If it's an exhibition, then it might be a preliminary outline of the materials that will form part of the exhibition. If it's a piece of creative writing or translation, then a body of the creative text or translated text along with an accompanying critical commentary. So it doesn't follow a different pattern in terms of the structure or the progressions.
Thank you. That's a good answer. We have a question from Ina, which I'll read out. For a PhD project exploring the intersection of multilingualism and economics, to what extent do you expect candidates to have formal academic backgrounds in both fields? For instance, would a master's in language studies and a bachelor's in economics be considered sufficient? Additionally, what would such an interdisciplinary research proposal be welcomed within your program?
Well, I think, economics isn't what we study. So I would be thinking more about perhaps applying to the LSE. And I think then we might offer secondary supervision. I actually have a PhD candidate at the moment whose primary supervisor is in the LSE. And I come in as secondary supervisor with that. But I think given if economics is the main focus, then I would suggest an institution like the LSE.
In that situation where we have one PhD supervisor being at the LSE and the other one being yourself, who does the qualification come from, the final qualification?
The LSE.
LSE, directly. Okay, thank you. Anna has asked, I'm taking more courses and conducting more independent research to better my PhD proposal for the fall application after being unsuccessful in the past cycle for IES. Do you have any recommendations for reaching back out to potential supervisors to reopen conversations? That was for Andrew.
Yes, I think it's the same as Charles has mentioned in answer to answering a previous question. In the first instance, it's best to get in touch with me directly as Director of Studies, and I can then speak to you about the research proposal. We can look at how the research proposal has developed and the additional skills that you refer to. And then I can make a decision about whether there is potential supervisory expertise from within the institute. I go back to what I said, that the fit between supervisor and project is really absolutely crucial. And if it's more appropriate for us to direct you elsewhere, then that's the right thing for us to do. But get back in touch with me and I can pick up the conversation, be delighted to pick up the conversation with you and explore things.
Great, thank you. Another question is, how much do we need to be in London in order to conduct these PhDs? Can they be done by distance or mostly by distance?
I think I did touch on that briefly. It can be, there is the distance learning option, but the project is, any project is to a considerable extent led by its sources. And certainly I would have thought that in ILCS, and Charles and Jamille can answer this in a minute, it's going to be quite common that the sources will be in different countries outside the UK. So really it's dependent upon the project. But if you are formally on the distance learning program, there are stated regulations and they are available on the web, and from memory, the requirement is that the student is required to be present in London for a minimum period of time at twice in the year, and that is in order to undertake essential training. But Charles and Jamille, you probably have got something to say about languages and cultures.
Yeah, I think we would subscribe entirely to that, Andrew. I mean, many of our students do work in different parts of the world. They need to be doing that. But at the same time, they need to be in touch with us. They need to be really availing themselves of the training program that we offer, both in person and online. So it's very flexible, and it's dependent upon student need. You certainly don't need to be in London all the time.
Great, thank you. Another question is, as a PhD student studying full-time, what is the time commitment that I need to give to the PhD, and is it possible to have a part-time job while studying? Jamille.
Do you want me to take that one? I think this is a difficult one to answer. Full-time study means full-time study. And while it is inevitable that students will probably likely take on part-time work, either to help support themselves financially, or indeed to sustain a career, for a full-time student, the focus does need to be very squarely on the PhD in order to be able to complete it within the 3 to 4 years. If the financial situation of the student is such that part-time student is the more appropriate option, then that is what we would recommend. I mean, there's no hard and fast rule in terms of saying that you have to spend 8 hours a day on your PhD. The PhD is a very, because it's an independent piece of work, it can be very flexible, and students can spend large concentrated periods of time on their PhD, and then other periods of time where perhaps they are easing off a little bit. But full-time does mean full-time. So the expectation is the amount of time that you would put into an undergraduate program or a master's program full-time is the same for a PhD. My colleagues might disagree with that, but I think that's...
No. I think that's absolutely right, Andrew. I think of course, students will do part-time work here and there. That's when it starts to be quite more than that, then I think one has conversations with the supervisor, and I think, as Andrew said, it is very important for the PhD to be full-time. We do have a number of cases where you can switch between full-time and part-time for whatever reason, and that is something that one would discuss with one supervisor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to quickly add to that, I think this is about finding a balance. Right. Of course, a PhD demands a considerable amount of time and dedication and focus, but I think each person can find the best ways to accommodate that in accordance with what is possible and the financial implications involved.
Great. Thank you, everybody. That's all the questions that we've had come in. So I think we'll end the webinar here. Thank you, each of you, for your time today and for your contributions to this webinar. And thank you to everybody who's attended. I hope you have found this session useful. We have recorded this session, so I'll send this out in an email in the coming days to anybody who's joined and anybody who hasn't been able to join. So thank you. That's the end of the webinar now. Like we said, you can email any of the program directors today, Andrew, Charles, and Jamille. And if you have any additional questions, or you have a proposal that you would like to discuss, do you have any final words to say? If not, we can close here.
We're delighted to hear from you, and thank you for coming.
That's all right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.